Alright, this is my first part of a Let's Play I'm going to be doing of Sunless Sea by Failbetter Games. This is, of course, in anticipation of Failbetter's upcoming game, Sunless Skies, which I backed on Kickstarter. I discovered this game, just found it on Steam one day, probably during a summer sale. I can barely even remember at this point. I just saw the tagline, you know, go mad, eat your crew. I thought that was kind of funny. Didn't look at the game for months, and then just on a whim installed it. I didn't know anything about it. I knew nothing about Failbetter or Fallen London, and it turned out to be one of the most engrossing and interesting experiences I had that summer, or whenever I started playing this game. Anyway, I continued to play it and unravel the lore. Eventually, I actually did check out Fallen London, their first browser-based game, which is excellent, and really, in a lot of ways, I think playing this game before Fallen London gave me kind of a different take on it. Basically, the backstory of this is very simply this. Fallen London is a browser game set in the titular city of Fallen London, which has fallen underneath the Earth's surface, along with several other cities over the last, centuries or so. And the game itself, Fallen London, is set pretty much entirely in the city and the different districts and such. It's a complete role-playing game. But this is more concerned about the world of Fallen London, more about the oceans that surround it and the islands around that. And in a lot of ways, it touches not just on the lore of each of the islands and the ports you could visit, but more about the lore of the gods of the world around it, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, I've played hours and hours. In fact, I've played 209 hours according to Steam, which is actually less than I thought. And I'm just going to be starting a new game. I have unlocked some of the basically end game things, which let you start off with higher stats and such, which in a lot of ways is better because one of the failings, I think, one of the biggest failings of Sunless Sea, possibly its biggest failing, and by the way, I should still say it's an amazing game. The biggest failing, I think, is that it is a very, very hard learning curve. And in fact, learning curve doesn't even go into it. The difficulty curve in general is just insane. It basically takes hours and hours of grinding to get a decent ship, which hopefully I can either speed up or cut out entirely. But once you get it, the world does open up, and more importantly, up to that point, it really is all about learning the lore of the land and everything, and creating this name for yourself in this weird, bizarre world, as you can even see just from looking at the loading screen. Anyway, just for this, I'll pick the standard. I'll just pick an option for choosing who I am. My past. This is me, the shadowed stranger at the moment. I'll just give you a quick run through the HUD actually before we get started. You got your shields over here. That's basically how much hull, how much health I have. The speed of the ship, fastest, negative fastest, which basically means reverse. How much fuel I have is recorded here, and the engine temperature, which is actually pretty important, is recorded here. This is your hunger bar. I never understood why they had this little thing, because you can't move this meter around. That doesn't change. It just means that, and then, well, of course I figured out later why it's there and why it can extend up to here. Basically, your hunger increases, you and your crew's hunger increases until it reaches this bar, and then if you have any food left, you will eat it, and it will drop to 0. This is possibly the most important meter in the entire game. It is the terror meter. These little dots will light up until eventually it completes the circle, and you'll get one little tick of terror. The logbook basically just shows interesting things that have happened, and this is your I think it's called secrets bar. It basically is like experience, and it's determined by every time you see something new, whether it's a new port, a new landmark, maybe you do something interesting in one of the options, you'll get fragments, and those fragments can be added up to get a secret. Your pages score, which is one of the 5 stats, determines how quickly you get these. So especially for starting a new game, you really want to make sure that you get your pages score higher. Um, this shows how many crew you have, how many sailors you have on board. Crew is kind of a double-edged sword because on the one hand, if you don't have above, I believe it's 75% or 70% of the like maximum crew for your ship, you will go at half speed, and if you have below 50%, you'll go at like quarter speed. Or sorry, if you have above 50%, you'll go like at normal speed, and if you have below that, you'll go at half speed, and below like quarter of the max crew, you'll go at, I think it's like quarter speed basically. Like this basically becomes 1 at 50%, and at 25% it becomes almost, you're barely even moving. You're basically dead in the water. These are the 5 different slot, well 6 if you include the mascot, with the 5 main slots for different crew members. Obviously there's your generic like sailors that just do the work on your ship, but then on top of that you have 5 positions that can be filled at any time by special people you meet in the world. A surgeon, a gunnery officer, a cook, a chief engineer, and a first officer. Actually, I'll keep that open. And yeah, and these are the 5 stats. You got your irons, which is basically how much damage you do to everything. Your mirrors, so this is how quickly you can draw a bead on someone in a combat situation. The veils, which is, as it says, how quickly or at what range the enemies will spot you. Pages, which, as we said, increases the speed you convert fragments into secrets, and hearts, which is really just for helping around your terror test. In fact, it's possibly the most useless stat in the whole game. It that's there again. Like Sunless Sea isn't a perfect game, but for a company that basically has been making browser-based, text-based games, making a game this good on pretty much their first try, early access and all, is impressive. Anyway, and this is of course the main screen. Oh yeah, this is money. I will not be seeing a lot of this in early game. I will be spending most of it, unfortunately. All right. One of the interesting things is you can always mouse over these little icons, and it'll give you little bits of flavor text like this. Anyway, we're going to start in the Blind Helmsman in Fallen London. Actually, you know what? I'll just cut this one right now, and next time I will start by actually starting the game proper, now that I've done this introduction.